morning, good morning, good morning. How is everybody? How was your July 4th? How was your July 4th? Awesome. Great holiday. We really enjoyed ourselves at our home. I got the barbecue. That's always a win. I love barbecue. I hope it was a great holiday for you, whatever you did, wherever you went. And hope it was a good one. So we are in a series that we just started 2 weeks ago called Foolish Games. We are taking a look at the book of Proverbs, which is known as the book of wisdom, written by the wisest man to ever live, Solomon. Solomon had the opportunity to ask God for anything he wanted. Instead of asking for riches or fame or whatever, he asked for wisdom, and God granted it to him. So we get these snippets of his wisdom all throughout the book of Proverbs. It's a great book. I hope you're reading through it as we're going through the series the next few weeks. It is worth your time. Last week, we took a look at the first foolish game. What games do fools play? And last week, we said that fools play marbles with word grenades. And the whole point of that was that fools throw words out there. They talk all the time just for the sake of talking, and they feel in their mind to be heard. So they run their mouth a lot, and they don't use discretion with their words. And we said that a wise person reveres words. We know the power of words. We know that one word said the wrong way can destroy a person. But we also know that a word said at the right time and the right way can build a person up. And we said that wise people revere and restrain their words. They speak only when they need to, not just because they have that right. We're going to take a look at the second foolish game today. And this is one that is very near and dear to my heart because I have taught on this more times probably than anything in my entire life. And I want to say this right out front. Adults, you might think that this one is more applicable to teenagers. You're right, it is applicable to them. But I've noticed something. In all the years that I worked with students and now working with adults over the last few years, even towards the end of the tenure I had working with students, I've noticed something very interesting. The things that we say only teenagers have as problems oftentimes grow up into adults. It's just they look a little different. And they look a little different because we're mature and we have say. So before you tune out today, there's just as much truth in this as for teenagers as it is for adults. Now, a couple years ago, I began a new journey in my life, and that new journey was profound. And that is that I began to journey into the world of spicy food. My father, just so you know, has apparently no feeling in his mouth. I don't get this man. We have bought him some of the hottest hot sauces you can find in the world. And he'll drip it on his food and eat it, and he doesn't flinch, he doesn't sweat, he doesn't react in any way, to the point that we are curious if he is even human anymore. We went to one of my favorite restaurants, Mission Barbecue, one time. Beth and I took my parents there, and they had their hottest sauce out, and Dad put it on. He's like, well, it's okay. And the hostess came over and was checking on us. Is everything okay there, with your meal and stuff? And Dad's like, do you have anything hotter? So she goes back and gets the habanero concentrate, and he puts it on his sandwich. He's like, that's a little better. What is wrong with you? Anyway, long story. Let me say this. I've begun this journey into spicy food. Now, I'm not aspiring to be one of these pepper-eating fools. It's interesting. It's different. So I started craving jalapenos, and I'll be honest, that's about as hot as I really have peaked at. I haven't pushed it beyond that. But it got me thinking, and actually I stumbled across an article that talked about why people eat spicy food. And the man that wrote this article, Paul Rosen, actually did research into this, and he went to countries, especially India and Mexico, where spicy food is part of culture. That's just how food is made. And he took a look at how this became a part of the culture, and he watched families as they would begin to introduce their 2- and 3-year-old kids to spice and spicy food and hot peppers. And he said he noticed the kids didn't like it. They hated it. But with time and with persistence and with the pressure that comes with culture and family, by the time they were 5 years of age, they just got used to it and they ate it like it was nothing. There was power and influence of the culture surrounding them, the family that surrounded them, the friends that surrounded them, that all of a sudden now they can eat anything by age. They eat peppers at age 5 that make grown men in America cry. So that also made me think, and this article goes into the fact of why then do Americans eat spicy food? You look at American food, stuff you would call American food. Most of our cuisine here is not spicy. Hamburgers, not really spicy. Hot dogs, definitely not spicy. So why on earth do we have guys who punish themselves and women who punish themselves eating the spicy stuff? You ready for it? The researcher said peer pressure. The fact that, and I know this because, again, I did work with students for a long time. If you get a group of teenage students, guys, together, and you're like, I bet you can't eat this. That's all you have to say right there. And all of a sudden it becomes the alpha male challenge, that they have to try and eat the hottest thing than everybody else. They're always trying to outdo each other, even though they're sweating and on fire, But literally, most hot food eaters or spicy food eaters in America were inspired by peer pressure. It's not cultural, but it is still something in common with those who come from a culture that eats spicy foods. The people that surround them, the culture that surrounds them, is what influences them to do this. So it gets me thinking about this thing of associations. Because there's an important lesson in this about our association with other people. Whether you believe it or not, that even as adults, we are still influenced by those around us, whether good or bad. This inspires many different areas that you probably don't really even think about. Example, the stuff you buy, the clothing you are wearing right now. There is a chance that some of you are wearing clothes that you either heard about a brand from a friend or somebody, or maybe you liked what they saw, or maybe the style or whatever it is, and you were influenced in buying what you wore, whether it be shoes, shirts, whatever. You were inspired by your associations. You don't always think about that. How about this? Our interests are sometimes influenced by those that we associate with. I mean, why else would people play golf? You have to be inspired by somebody to get frustrated hitting this little white ball around grass and getting frustrated as anything. Association. Maybe it was a family member that played golf. Your dad, your grandfather, uncle, whatever it was. They played golf and you were like, that's kind of fun. I want to pursue that. Your interests are, even as adults, that's still inspired by that. Our views on things, whether it be ethical views, political views, you name it, are inspired and sometimes influenced by those around us. And that's why they change. Even as we grow older, they change. Because culture sometimes helps shape those and change those. Our speech is influenced by the people around us. It's why some of us who are older dads, we try to say hip terms, and our kids wince in pain when we say them. Because we're trying to be cultural. We heard others say it, and our kids thought they were cool, so maybe if I say it, our kids will think we're cool, right? Because that's too hip to be square. 80s people, that's a throwback to you. Yeah, you get it. But we try, but we're influenced by people around us. You see something on TV. It's why so many children, back when I was a child, were saying, go ahead, make my day. Movies, you have this association. Yeah, I didn't know Clint Eastwood personally, but when your friends are saying all the lines Clint Eastwood said or what Rambo said and all that, you start saying them too. Your associations influence that. And your associations influence your priorities. That's why you will labor for hours to make your lawn look perfect. Because sometimes if you live in a neighborhood that everybody has Better Homes and Garden looking lawns, there's a pressure that comes that sometimes you need to have your lawn look the same way. And all of a sudden, you may never have been interested in having a lawn that looks great or landscaping, but all of a sudden, because of what is around you, there's a new added pressure to your life that you've got to look like them and not stick out and have grass this tall. Like it or not, even as adults, we continue to be pressured. We continue to be directed by people we associate with, even if we aren't thinking about it. And the reason we do this is because we want to gain something from people. Sometimes the thing that we want to gain from our associations or our friendships is just fun. We want to have fun. I don't know too many people here who do not want to have fun. If you don't want to have fun, come see me afterwards. I will lay hands on you and pray for you. We want to have fun. There's nothing wrong with that. And so we pick friends that we like to have fun with. Nothing wrong with that at all. Other things that we want to gain. Sometimes we want to gain image. We will associate with certain people because they're well known, they're popular, they're important, and we associate with them because we feel that if we are around them, it's going to rub off on us and people will see us as important or significant or someone that they should be watching. We do it to gain value sometimes. We do it to gain value who we associate with. This is why so many young men in inner cities run to gangs. They want to feel value, some importance of something, and so they'll join a gang and they'll endure things and do things they never would have done before because of criminal action or whatever, but they do it because it gives them a feeling of value. We associate with people because it gives us something. And sometimes we need to identify what that something is. The dating relationship that you are in. What is it you're seeking to gain? Especially when you know that relationship is unhealthy. What are you seeking to gain? Again, I know many of us can say this is more of a teenager thing, but I've seen it too many times, that we even see cliques forming within adult circles, and yes, in the church too. That clique may be the people that just like to get around and complain, or maybe people that just have a lot in common. And I see this, and I'm not condemning it totally. We encourage life groups here, but sometimes it can become unhealthy. And even in the church, we have to be on guard for that. If you don't believe that adults can still be influenced, I have a short video here. Now, for anyone who attended the Global Leadership Summit last year, this is going to look familiar. And the reason it's going to look familiar is one of the speakers actually used this, and it ticked me off when she did because I have had this and used this for years, and she's stealing my fire. I must have inspired her. But her dad was the producer of this TV show. So this is from the old show Candid Camera. It's an older black and white version of this. But if you don't think adults can still be influenced by everything around them, just watch this video.
The gentleman in the elevator now is a candid star. These folks who are entering, the man with a white shirt, the lady with a trench coat, and subsequently one other member of our staff will face the rear. And you'll see how this man in the trench coat tries to maintain his individuality, but little by little, he looks at his watch, but he's really making an excuse for turning just a little bit more to the wall. Now we'll try it once again. Here's the candid subject. Here comes the Candid Camera staff, 3 of them at least. And this man has apparently been in groups before. Now, here's a fella with his hat on in the elevator. First he makes a full turn to the rear and Charlie closes the door. A moment later, we'll open the door. Everybody's changed positions. Now we'll see if we can use group pressure for some good. Now, in a moment, on Charlie's signal, everybody turns forward. Notice they take off their hats. And now, do you think we could reverse the procedure? Watch.
All right. right, so don't think that adults cannot be influenced as something as the direction you face in an elevator. It's amazing seeing that because obviously the people don't know what's going on and yet so easily influenced because they don't want to stand out. They don't want to stand out. And they want to fit in. It happens with us as adults. It's why sadly, we've seen people, friends of ours, family members of us, we watch them begin to associate with a group of people, and we know it's an unhealthy situation. We know that these people are going to bring them down, and we watch them go from promising to falling apart, and the potential is gone. It breaks our hearts because of their associations, and yet we do it ourselves. We see people get into toxic relationships, and sometimes they get out of that toxic relationship, and then they go back into another one, or they go right back into the exact same one. And we know they have common sense, but we continue to watch them deteriorate. Those of you that are Boston Celtic fans here remember a story from the 80s, if you were alive then, about a player that the Boston Celtics drafted from Maryland, a man named Len Bias. Len Bias was one of the most promising basketball prospects since Michael Jordan, who had only just come into the NBA at this time. This man was going to take the Celtics to the next level. He's drafted. He goes back to Maryland, and within 3 days was dead because of his associations that pulled him in to drug usage, and he overdoses and dies. Time and time again, we watch lives trashed around us. But before we think it's everybody else, let's make sure it's not us. My big idea today is this, that those that surround you shape you. Those that surround you and your life, your circles, are going to shape who you are, what's important to you, and the direction and success of your life. We're going to take a look at a few verses today. Out of Proverbs, obviously, because that's what we're studying. And today we want to start with Proverbs 13:20 that talks about the fool and how he associates or who he associates with. And it says this, walk with the wise and become wise. For a companion of fools suffers harm. Walk with the wise, associate with the wise, befriend the wise, imitate them, be around them, surround yourself with them. You're good. You will become a wise person. But a fool, they don't do that. A fool suffers harm because anyone that hangs around them only becomes like them. They get dragged into the ditch. This word harm here actually means injurious. It's contrary to what God desires for your life. The fool helps you do exactly what God tells you not to. Remember how we said that Proverbs is really a good comparison? In fact, the word Proverbs means to compare yourself to. This is one of those. When I look at my life, am I more known for associating with wise people, God-fearing people, God-driven people, or people who don't even care, even some of them with Christian in one of their identities? Wise people or foolish people, whichever one, it's going to have a tremendous impact on the outcome of our life. We're literally choosing our teachers for life. I don't know if you've ever thought about who you associate with, but you are choosing who teaches you, choosing who models for you how to live life, what your priorities should be, what you should do with your time, what you should be aiming for in life. They become your role models, even if you think you're in control. I'm in charge. I'm an adult. I'm mature. I've got this. You're choosing your teacher. And ultimately, we become guilty by association when we align ourselves with fools, when we begin to surround ourselves with people who have no desire to honor God, no desire to please God. If that is the primary source of input into our life, we become just like them. I had the privilege of baptizing a young man when I was in Baltimore, and his name was James. James was an amazing kid. He was in the foster program. He was about 16 years old. A family in our church had the blessing of having him in their home, and he became a part of our youth group. Just wanted to know God's word more. prayed to receive Christ, I had this wonderful opportunity to baptize him, and I'm like, this is what it's all about. This is what it's all about. He was surrounded by good people that influenced him and encouraged him. After he graduated, we didn't see him around as much anymore. He was back in the inner city. And about a year or two later, one of my youth leaders came up to me and said, "Have you heard about James?" I was like, "No, I actually haven't heard anything from James." He said he's been incarcerated. His father, James, had been incarcerated. James has now been incarcerated. And my youth leader went down to talk to James and found out what had happened. And James, who was just, again, one of the nicest kids you'll ever meet, had begun to hang around with some old friends. Those old friends one day decided they were bored, and they decided to rob a store. James was the getaway driver. And James was not the type to put up a fight. He just wanted to be loved and accepted and valued. And so he saw it in these young men. And as a result, now was doing time for who he associated with. So promising. So awesome to see his love for Jesus. And yet became a companion of fools and threw a life that was so promising away. Proverbs gives us this as a guide, even as adults, that we must be careful on who we associate ourselves with. What is our second foolish game? Our second foolish game is this. Fools play Simon Says with other fools. Fools play Simon Says with other fools. You remember the game Simon Says. I was never really good at it because I never paid attention to the person up front. But Simon Says literally is the fool will do exactly what the fool tells them to do. And they won't ask why. And frankly, the person who's the fool that they're following isn't asking why either. The fool's just doing what the fool wants to do because the fool thinks they have control of their life. And they know better than anything God can throw at them. The fool plays Simon Says with other fools. This is continued in Proverbs in another verse. In Proverbs 14:7 it says this, "Stay away from a fool, for you will not find knowledge on their lips." Stay away from them, avoid them, cross to the other side of the street, cut off the relationship, get away with them, or get away from them. You won't find knowledge on their lips. In other words, this, they can't teach you anything. They are not going to teach you anything of value except maybe how not to live life. But most of the time we aren't hanging out with people because we feel that we should be learning about how not to live my life. We're hanging out with people because we seek to gain something out of it, of value, of purpose, of identity. And Solomon says here, stay away from them. You're not going to find anything beneficial for you. You're not going to find anything that's going to benefit you in your spiritual maturity, and they have nothing to add to your life that is of any kind of worth. We surround ourselves with fools, we will become just like them, and we will gain nothing. Again, we think we're immune to this. We think we're in control because we're adults, and yet I see it over and over and over again. I see it in our culture. Man, we are so desperate to know what a political thinker or a pop icon or somebody significant, a deep thinker. We're so anxious to get their take on things that it's like we have the inability to think until we hear from them. And then once we hear from them, we're like, that's what I believe. We're so concerned about what other people think and not about what God thinks. And frankly, we'll do anything to hear what they believe on things. Let me point this out. You know, as adults, we don't think we're being influenced, but I was thinking about this week. I'm like, so how are we influenced by our associations? Well, first and foremost, one of the biggest tools these days for us as adults to be shaped by our associations is shame and guilt. When we're around these associations that are not good for us, that are not healthy for us, that are adding nothing to us spiritually, we feel guilty because they view life differently or they have a different set of rules for their life. We feel guilty, and so we begin to compromise because we don't want to stick out. We don't want to cause any fight or tension because we believe something different than them. And so we begin to say, well, you know what? They may have a point there. And so we begin to slowly take baby steps of compromise and where we stand on things and what is important to us and what we should be doing with our life. And the next thing you know, baby step after baby step after baby step of compromise, we become just like them. Be careful who you associate with. Let me say this real quick. We're in the world, okay? We're surrounded by people who may not follow Jesus or maybe just completely opposed to anything of God. You cannot separate yourself from the world. You can't. You're going to have people around. You're at workplaces with people who don't follow Jesus at all, or don't love God, or don't even believe in a God. I am not telling you quit your job and go work at some place that you are just surrounded by Christians. No, that's been the problem with Christianity for a long time. That's when, as I've preached on in the past, we become the lighting section in Home Depot, where all the lights are clustered around and every other place barely has any light in it. We don't need more lights in the lighting section. We need light to go into darkness, but the light has to continue to remain to be light. And it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. Paul continues this thought of what we see in Proverbs in this. And Paul in 1 Corinthians 15:33 says this, "Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character." Bad company corrupts good character. Now, what's interesting about this, I didn't know this until this week, when you see parentheses, he's quoting something. He's not quoting the Old Testament here. Paul's actually quoting a Greek poet. This is a song of the day. And Menander, the man who actually said this, says this exact same thing. And he uses something secular to prove something biblical. That we have to be careful who we associate with. Bad company will corrupt you. We think we're strong enough. We think we can endure it. We think we've got it together. But if all we are surrounded by is fools or people who don't have any interest in our spiritual growth or how we get to know God more, it is going to wear you down. I'm not saying you throw them all out and you disassociate yourself from them, but we're going to talk about something in a second that is more important with this than separating ourselves completely. It says that it corrupts, it subtly deteriorates. Remember I said baby steps? It baby steps you to bad character. Now, I love it when I stumble across something that is not Christian in its basis that confirms God's word, because to me it's like, you guys think you've got something completely new there. I got verses that were written a long time ago that proves what you're saying. You're only confirming it. One of the books that I've been reading through, I mentioned last week, is this 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. He's a behavioral psychologist. And his third rule for life is this: make friends with people who want the best for you. Make friends with people who want the best for you. And he continues to go into some stories of his life being raised in Western Canada about friends that he had who just kept repeating the cycle of getting nowhere in life because of who they associated with. And he says this a little later in the chapter. He says, sometimes when people have a low opinion of their own worth, or perhaps when they refuse responsibility for their lives, they choose a new acquaintance of precisely the type who proved troublesome in the past. Such people don't believe that they deserve any better, so they don't go looking for it. Or, catch this, perhaps they don't want the trouble of better. It's easy to be a companion of fools. They really have no requirements for you other than you just look just like them or become just like them. But it takes some efforts to find people that are healthy for you and good for you. Jordan continues on and says this: you're associating with people who are bad for you, not because it's better for anyone, but because it's easier. Failure is easy too. It's easier not to shoulder a burden. It's easier not to think and not to do and not to care. And the Bible tells us this, and we see it in the Bible over and over and over again. Your associations will either lift you up to be more like Christ or they will sink you. The game changer for us is this, that the wise practice focused association. The wise practice focused association. You're in the world. You're surrounded by people who have no desire to, don't care if you grow to know Jesus more, because they don't. And while we cannot separate ourselves from them, and I'm not recommending that you cut those relationships off unless they are tremendously unhealthy for you, I am saying that you need to have some focused association. And what I mean by this is, okay, you spend all this time with people who aren't serving God or love God in any way, and they're not adding anything to you spiritually, then you better focus some time, if not just as much time, with those who will. You have to be intentional about surrounding yourself with wise people, really to counteract what you're getting from those who have no desire for God. What associations are in your life that are doing that? Do you have more of them than you do those who have no care, no concern to follow God or to love Him? We have to be intentional and focused on this time. It's amazing to me that some people know every penny they spend and where it went, and they know every minute of every day, and they have it planned out because they're intentional, they're on it. But when it comes to who they associate with, we'll just take it as it comes. We have to be just as intentional about surrounding ourselves with wise, Jesus-loving people who are going to pour into our life and aren't going to put up with us when we start to slip. They're going to lovingly guide us back. We have to do that just to make sure we're associating with the wise. Two other things that came across my path this past week. One is a book called The Formula, The Universal Laws of Success. This is a theoretical physicist. And the long story of this is that he talked about the fact that people think that people become successful because of how they perform at their job or how they perform at life. Well, they're a good parent because of their performance. They're really good with children and all of this. Or they became really good at business because they're just super smart and they work hard and all that. And he has done research to prove that's only part of it. The bigger part is who they associated with. Because they didn't have anything that was a flashy idea that somebody else hadn't thought of. It's just they had the right networks around them to give them success. I stumbled across another one that talked about Hollywood actors, that some of the biggest names we have were not big for years, and yet he has pictures of them 10 years before they ever became a star hanging out with other actors who were stars, and eventually it paid off. Who they associated with led to success, and so it will be spiritually, even more so spiritually. You want to be spiritually mature, you need to get some spiritually mature people around you. You need to get them in your life, and you need to prioritize it as much as you do any other friendships you have. Because if you want to be wise, you must associate with the wise. You want a strong marriage? Hang out with those who have strong marriages. You want to be a good parent? Associate with those that you're like, man, they've got something with their families. I want that. Spend some time with them. Ask them questions. You want to be a mature Christian? Hang with mature Christians. Paul even says a little bit later in the New Testament, says, imitate me as I imitate Christ, because he knows we're going to imitate something. So let's imitate somebody who is loving Jesus, that when you see them, you're like, that's exactly how Jesus would be. And when you find that person, don't get them out of your sights, even if you annoy them. Don't get them out of your sights. Focus time with them. My challenge this week is this: to prioritize your time with those who you want to be like. Prioritize your time. Start thinking about whatever that area is that you feel that you need to get better, because all of us have those. And begin to think of who is it that sort of models what I think it would be good or healthy or right, especially in this area of spiritual maturity. Who are the people that love Jesus? I just see Jesus in their actions, in their words, how they treat people, how they go about their life, how they prioritize their life. Think about who that person is. Identify them. And then I want you to do the scary thing, especially for you introverts. I want you to reach out to them and say, hey, can we get together for an hour? I have some questions I just want to ask you about parenting, about following Jesus, whatever it is. And set that time up and take advantage of that time and ask them. And then after that time is done, take what they have given you and ingest it and begin to put it into practice. But then you need to set up another time with them. And then another. And then another. And the reason is because that's how we associate. It's not a one-time deal. This is an ongoing relationship that you need to have mature believers around you. Those of you that may be advanced in your faith, you've been following Jesus a long time, and you sit here and think, Dan, this is pointless to me. Wrong. And here's why. If you don't have someone in your circle that is an immature, maybe still trying to figure the Jesus thing out, that you're pouring into their life, then you aren't associating with people who need you. Who is in your circle that you can pour your life and your experience and all of that into to help them become a mature believer? Remember our theme for this year? It's +1. It's about making disciples. Those of you that have walked with Jesus a long time have so much to give. People, some who are just desperate for healthy association with the wise. And you have that gift to give them. So why don't you have them around you? That's what we're called to do. I close with this. Remember who I said wrote this book? Or the majority of it? Who was it? Solomon. Yeah, wisest man ever. It's interesting. Solomon was known for something. Not just being wise, but he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. That is busy, all right? Busy. Now, that's not the unwise thing there, though I definitely would not recommend that. What's interesting is that the wisest man on earth, there's a change in his life. He had been a God-fearing man, a God-honoring man. And in 1 Kings 11, 3-4, I'm just going to read this for you. It's not on the screen. It says this. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines. Most of these were a political affiliation and alignment. That's why he took them on. And it says this, and his wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. The wisest man in the world, who wrote these verses about surrounding yourself with the wise, not being led astray by the fool, they have nothing to give you, let himself compromise by his wives. He began to follow their example. His associations led him astray when he knew better. He knew better. He should have been stronger and surrounded himself with other wise people that could pour into his life. But he did not. And so he drifted. Wisest man in the world became a fool. Let's pray. God, thank you for just this time to reflect on this. Lord, we have so many relationships at work, our community, here at church, our family, so many of these different associations. And God, as we look at these, as we evaluate them, Lord, it's not that we need to end all of these unhealthy things, although there may be some we need to cut off. But it's more about, am I focusing my associations? Am I putting wise people within arm's reach that I'm letting them pour into my life, and I'm responding to them, and I'm becoming wise as they are? Lord, if there's anyone here who has that toxic relationship that maybe they need to end, that today is a day that you give them that resolve to do the right thing, because they know it just continually drags them down, that they would end it. Lord, for those that maybe just need some wise people around them, that you would open their eyes, open their hearts to the area of need that they need wisdom. And Lord, you would bring people into their path, even as we go out for coffee at the end of the service, that maybe they bump into that person that they know they need to spend time with, growing in wisdom that you have given that other person. Lord, help us to be careful and cunning and wise with our relationships. Lord, if there's anyone here who doesn't even have that relationship with you, and they've been feeling that need to start a relationship with you, that God, you would move in their heart that today is the day they say, God, I know I'm a sinner and I disobey you. I'm doing my own thing and I'm not even listening to you. But today is a day that I want to begin the journey of following you, to know you more and to associate with you. Lord, today, may this be the turning point for them, that they choose to follow Jesus and become more like you. We ask this in your name.